So by every measure across every institution, there's racial disparity in the United States. I think we know this, right? Across every institution, there's racial disparity. And we live in a society that is deeply separate and unequal. At the same time, our dominant narratives don't acknowledge that.
He is pure evil, but you'd never know it by looking at him.
I'm not afraid of him. He just doesn't look like the type to kill somebody.
Jeffrey Dahmer, an unassuming chocolate factory worker, would eventually confess that he had seduced, murdered, and dismembered 17 young men.
The former Stanford swimmer hustling through the gauntlet of reporters hurling questions at him.
I remember them to be shy, quiet, well-behaved kids.
I think that given Mr. Becker's position in life, to find him guilty at this point would slam a lot of doors.
He kind of standoffish and really didn't talk to many people.
Doctors say Bundy is a fascinating case study of contrast. A bright, articulate, handsome murderer.
This morning, like many shooters, James Holmes has been described as a loner, but he's also apparently brilliant, studying for a PhD in neuroscience.
Ted Bundy is an articulate, intelligent, 42-year-old man, a former Boy Scout, law student, and Republican Party activist.
He was just quiet. He was just quiet.
This man with a quiet, almost shy demeanor became a master manipulator who was able to lure strangers he met at gay bars to his apartment.
Holmes had no criminal record in Colorado other than a speeding ticket. Police say he began to quietly plan the attack. Around the same time, the quiet Phi Beta Kappa student withdrew from a PhD program in neuroscience at the University of Colorado.
How did a boy born into a hard-working, middle-class family turn into the worst kind of monster imaginable?
And that the recording on the suspect's phone was bizarre, freakish.
The shooter's father, Peter Lanza, is a vice president at GE Capital.
He began drinking heavily as a teenager, dropped out of college, was arrested for indecent exposure, disorderly conduct, and fondling a 13-year-old boy.
Holmes grew up here in a prosperous San Diego community. This was Holmes 6 years ago. A clean-cut, 5'11" student in San Diego, where he was perceived as a loner.
And also revealed today, testimony from an unknown neighbor that Lanza spent lots of time in his basement playing violent video games.
2 hours before the attack, he took 100 milligrams of the powerful painkiller Vicodin.
There's nothing that indicates that Brock Turner was any kind of a monster. It was a bad mistake on that night, and he will suffer the consequences for the rest of his life.
But in prison, he finally cannot act on his savage desires.
A former Stanford swimmer convicted of 3 felonies after attacking an unconscious young woman.
He became so warped by his evil impulses that he even took a victim's head with him to work at the Ambrosia chocolate factory.
It's a tragedy for this court to see. It's such a total waste, I think, of humanity that I've experienced in this court. You're a bright young man.
A thin teenager in an oversized shirt, also wearing a hint of a smile.
But Jeffrey Dahmer was out of control. The urge to kill had overpowered him.
You try to imagine yourself in his place and to see how he's feeling, looking at the pillows with blood stains and everything, if he really did it or not.
I think the fact that the parents were divorced must have contributed to it.
How did Jeffrey Dahmer get away with murder after murder for 13 years?
Killer Ted Bundy was executed yesterday morning. He talked about the path that led him from law school to Florida's electric chair.
Brock Turner and now David Becker. Privilege is a lethal thing.
This isn't about guilt. It's about responsibility, right, and practice. If we're not actually demonstrating in the practice of our lives, then us just saying, oh yes, I see this, is not really, it's meaningless. This idea that we could be exempt from the deep messages that surround us 24/7. This idea that we're having a universal experience, that what's welcoming to me would be welcoming to everybody. This message, these messages, and all the ways I've tried to show you in this short amount of time, again, whether we're conscious of it or not, it's there.